The Gulf of Maine had been kind to the Northern Star and her crew that October morning in 2023. The 56-foot fishing trawler's nets were heavy with cod and haddock, making Captain Steve Reynolds optimistic about finishing their quota early. After 30 years at sea, Steve thought he'd seen everything these waters could throw at him. He was wrong. His crew was experienced. Mike Donovan, the 48-year-old first mate who'd worked these waters since he was a teenager. Brothers Tom and Jack Harper, 35 and 32, who handled the nets like they were born to it. And Luis Martinez, their 29-year-old engineer who could fix anything that broke at sea. "Net's coming up heavy, Cap," Tom called from the stern. The morning sun glinted off the spray as their fourth haul of the day broke the surface. The net bulged promisingly, water cascading from its sides as the hydraulic winch groaned under the weight. That's when they noticed something was wrong. Fish were streaming out through large holes torn in the net's side. As they watched, more tears appeared, as if something inside was shredding its way out. "What the hell?" Jack muttered, leaning over the gunwale for a better look. The water around the net churned violently, and a massive gray shape emerged, a great white shark, easily 16 feet long, that had become entangled while feeding on their catch. The shark thrashed powerfully, its movements threatening to destroy the expensive net completely. Steve had seen sharks caught in their nets before, but never one this size, and never one so aggressive. "Cut it loose," Steve ordered. But before anyone could move, the shark's thrashing pulled Jack off balance. He pitched forward, barely catching the rail with one hand as the shark's tail swept past inches from his face. Mike grabbed Jack's belt, hauling him back aboard as the shark's struggles intensified. The net was starting to wrap around the boat's propeller, and the shark's violent movements were pulling them sideways in the water. "Luis, kill the winch!" Steve shouted. But it was too late. The shark made a powerful lunge, and the strain proved too much for the hydraulic system. The winch cable snapped with a sound like a gunshot, whipping across the deck dangerously close to Tom's head. The shark, still partially entangled, now circled the boat with frightening speed. The remaining net trailed behind it like a grotesque bridal veil, periodically catching on the boat's hull and yanking them hard to port. "Get that net loose from the stern," Steve ordered, fighting the wheel to maintain control. Luis and the Harper brothers worked frantically to free the tangled mess, but the shark's repeated passes made it nearly impossible to get close to the gunwale. The situation deteriorated when the dragging net finally fouled their propeller completely. The engine made a sickening, grinding sound before dying, leaving them wallowing in the increasingly rough seas. The shark's behavior grew more aggressive. Instead of trying to free itself from the net, it began ramming the boat's hull. Each impact sent shudders through the vessel, and Steve could hear the aluminum hull groaning under the assault. "Mayday, mayday!" Mike's voice crackled over the radio. "This is fishing vessel Northern Star, 20 miles northeast of Portland. We have a large shark attacking the boat and are dead in the water." Water began seeping in through the hull near the waterline where the shark's repeated impacts had caused a stress fracture. Luis disappeared below with a damage control kit, but reported back grimly, "We're taking on more water than the pumps can handle." The shark's next attack targeted their rudder, its powerful jaws crushing the metal like a tin can. The boat lurched sickeningly, and Tom lost his footing on the slick deck. He slid toward the gunwale, straight toward the shark's next pass. Jack dove for his brother, catching his arm just as Tom's legs went over the side. The shark's massive head rose from the water, jaws open to reveal rows of serrated teeth. Mike grabbed a gaff hook and swung it desperately at the predator's sensitive snout, barely forcing it to veer away at the last second. The brothers scrambled back from the gunwale, but their problems were far from over. The boat was now sitting lower in the water, its stern heavily weighed down by the flooding engine compartment. The shark continued its assault, each attack more determined than the last. A Coast Guard helicopter appeared on the horizon just as their situation seemed most desperate. The shark, agitated by the aircraft's noise, made one final powerful attack on the stern. The impact opened a massive gash in the hull, and Steve knew they had minutes at most before the Northern Star went down. "Abandon ship," he ordered, helping his crew deploy the life raft. They had to time their evacuation perfectly. The shark was still circling, partly entangled in their net, and now clearly agitated by the helicopter's presence. The crew leaped into the raft one by one as the Northern Star's stern slipped beneath the waves. The shark made several passes at the life raft, but seemed more interested in freeing itself from the net. The Coast Guard's rescue swimmer reached them just as their fishing vessel slipped beneath the surface completely. The shark made one final appearance, now free of the net, circling their raft once before disappearing into the depths. As they were winched to safety, Steve watched his livelihood sink into the cold Maine waters, marked only by a spreading slick of diesel fuel. Marine experts later suggested the shark's unusual aggression might have been triggered by the net entanglement and the boat's engine vibrations. The incident led to new discussions about fishing practices in Great White Territories and the need for better shark deterrent systems on commercial vessels. The crew of the Northern Star eventually returned to fishing with a new boat, though they added heavy-duty shark barriers to their nets. Steve had the crushed rudder from his old boat mounted in his living room, a reminder of the day they learned that sometimes the hunter can become the hunted. Today, the waters off Portland still draw fishing boats and great whites alike. But when the old-timers gather at the docks, they still talk about the monster shark that took down the Northern Star, a sobering reminder that no matter how long you've worked these waters, the sea always has one more surprise waiting. I'll write a 1,500-word story about a surfing competition that turns into a shark encounter with survivors who can tell the tale. The annual Pipeline Masters Surf Competition at Oahu's North Shore was in full swing on December 12, 2023. The waves were perfect, 8 to 10 feet, glassy, with ideal offshore winds. For professional surfer Jake Thompson, 28, this was his chance to clinch the world title. He couldn't have known that this competition would become infamous for reasons far beyond surfing. The morning heats had gone smoothly. Jake had advanced to the semifinals, where he would face Brazilian champion Marco Santos. The beach was packed with spectators, and a dozen camera drones buzzed overhead, capturing every wave. Water safety teams on jet skis patrolled the lineup, standard procedure for major competitions. "Something feels off today," said Danny Kekoa, a veteran water safety officer who'd worked pipeline for 20 years. He'd noticed unusual behavior in the local turtle population. They seemed to be avoiding their usual feeding grounds near the reef. The semi-final heat began at 2:15 p.m. Jake and Marco paddled out through the channel, accompanied by water safety teams. The waves were building with the incoming tide, and the first set of the heat was approaching. Marco caught the first wave, executing a perfect aerial maneuver that earned him a high score. Jake waited patiently for the next set, but as he sat on his board, he noticed the water around him had become eerily still. The usual schools of fish that darted beneath the surface were nowhere to be seen. The tiger shark appeared without warning. Its massive form, later estimated at 14 feet, glided between Jake and the nearest jet ski. Water safety officer Sarah Chen spotted it first, immediately radiating the alert through their communication system. "Shark in the lineup, all surfers out of the water." The evacuation should have been routine, they'd practiced it countless times. But as Jake began paddling toward the jet ski, a large set of waves appeared on the horizon. The incoming swell would trap them in the impact zone for precious minutes. The shark circled closer as the first wave of the set approached. Jake had no choice but to paddle for it, knowing the creature was somewhere beneath him. He made the drop just as the shark lunged, its jaws missing his board by inches. The wave's power drove him toward the dangerous reef below. Marco wasn't as fortunate. The shark targeted him next, striking his board from below with tremendous force. The impact launched him into the air, his board snapping in half from the shark's powerful bite. He hit the water hard, directly in the path of the next approaching wave. Sarah gunned her jet ski toward Marco, but the second wave of the set was already upon them. The Brazilian surfer disappeared beneath the whitewash as the shark made another pass. When he surfaced, his leg was bleeding from where the shark's rough skin had grazed him. Danny reached Marco first, hauling him onto the rescue sled as the shark circled back. The predator seemed agitated by the blood in the water, its movements becoming more erratic and aggressive. Sarah positioned her jet ski between the shark and the other rescuers, using the craft's wake to create confusion. Jake had made it inside the impact zone, but was now stuck between the breaking waves and the reef. The shark's massive shadow cruised beneath him, forcing him to stay on his board rather than duck dive the approaching waves. Each set pushed him closer to the razor-sharp coral below. The water safety team coordinated their response with practiced precision. 2 more jet skis arrived to help create a barrier between the shark and the surfers. Through their radios, they could hear the beach announcer clearing the water of other competitors and keeping the crowd back from the shoreline. The shark made one final powerful approach. It charged straight at Jake, who had no choice but to abandon his board and dive deep. The shark's teeth grazed his wetsuit as it passed, leaving long scratches but miraculously not breaking the skin. Sarah seized the moment to swoop in and pull Jake onto her rescue sled. The evacuation took less than 4 minutes, but to those involved, it felt like hours. From the beach, thousands of spectators and multiple camera crews captured the incident. Drone footage would later show the full scale of the shark, its powerful form clearly visible in the crystalline Hawaiian waters. Marco was treated for minor lacerations and a sprained shoulder from his impact with the water. Jake escaped with only scratches to his wetsuit, though both surfers' boards were destroyed. The competition was postponed, later moving to a different location to complete the final heats. Marine biologists studying the incident noted that the tiger shark's aggressive behavior was unusual. Further investigation revealed that illegal fishing activities nearby had attracted several large sharks to the area, disrupting their normal patterns. The incident led to stricter enforcement of fishing regulations around competition sites. Sarah Chen and Danny Kikoa were awarded commendations for their quick response. Their actions that day became a model for shark encounter protocols in professional surfing events worldwide. The water safety team's coordinated response was credited with preventing what could have been a far more tragic outcome. Jake Thompson returned to competition 3 months later, though he admitted the encounter had changed his relationship with the ocean. "You never forget something like that," he said in a later interview. "It reminds you that we're guests out there, and sometimes nature sends a pretty clear message about who's in charge." Today, the Pipeline Masters continues to draw the world's best surfers, but with enhanced safety measures in place. Multiple shark detection systems now supplement the traditional water patrol teams. The incident serves as a reminder that even in controlled, professional environments, the ocean's apex predators command respect. The footage captured that day is now used in water safety training worldwide, showing how proper protocols and quick thinking can mean the difference between life and death when encountering these powerful predators. For those who witnessed it firsthand, the memory of that massive tiger shark emerging from the depths of Pipeline remains a vivid reminder of the ocean's wild and unpredictable nature. The Sea Star, a 42-foot whale-watching vessel operating out of Monterey Bay, California, had been having an exceptionally good season in October 2023. Captain Rebecca Martinez knew these waters intimately, having spent 15 years guiding tourists to see the bay's magnificent marine life. But on October 23rd, her passengers would witness something far more dramatic than the usual whale sightings. The morning started routinely. 28 tourists boarded for the 9 a.m. trip, including the Chen family from Seattle, amateur wildlife photographer Mark Wilson, and a group of college students on a marine biology field trip. The crew consisted of Rebecca, her first mate Jim Parker, and marine naturalist Amy Davidson. "Conditions are perfect today," Amy announced during her safety briefing. The sea was calm, visibility excellent, and recent reports indicated a pod of humpback whales feeding nearby. What she didn't mention were the unusual number of seal carcasses that had been washing up along the coast recently. 2 hours into the trip, they found the whales. 3 humpbacks were bubble net feeding, a spectacular behavior where the massive creatures create rings of bubbles to trap fish. The tourists lined the rails, cameras clicking rapidly as the whales burst through the surface, their massive mouths agape. 12-year-old Katie Chen first noticed something was wrong. "Mom, the birds are leaving," she said, pointing to the seabirds that had been diving for fish suddenly taking flight en masse. The whales, too, abruptly ceased their feeding, diving deep with powerful flicks of their flukes. Rebecca had seen enough whale watches to know this wasn't normal behavior. That's when she spotted the dorsal fin, large, distinctively triangular, and cutting through the water with deliberate purpose, a great white, and a massive one at that. "Ladies and gentlemen, please move to the center of the boat," Jim announced calmly, though his face showed concern. The shark, easily 18 feet long, began circling the vessel. Its behavior was unusual. Great whites rarely showed interest in boats this size. The college students, led by their professor, Dr. Thompson, pressed against the railings with their cameras despite Jim's warnings. The shark's circles grew tighter, its enormous form clearly visible in the clear water. Mark Wilson's telephoto lens captured incredible shots of the predator's scarred hide and black eyes. The situation escalated when the shark suddenly changed its pattern. Without warning, it charged the boat's stern, ramming it with enough force to knock several passengers off their feet. Mrs. Chen fell hard, hitting her head on a bench. The shark struck again, this time from the side, sending a spray of water over the deck. "Mayday! Mayday!" Rebecca's voice was steady as she radioed for help. "This is Sea Star, 3 miles off Point Pinos. We have an aggressive shark attacking the vessel. 28 passengers aboard." The shark's next attack targeted their port engine, its powerful jaws crushing the propeller housing. The boat lurched sickeningly, and Dr. Thompson nearly went overboard. Jim grabbed him just as the shark surfaced nearby, its massive head rising from the water as if to assess its next move. Rebecca skillfully maneuvered the vessel using the remaining engine, trying to maintain their position. The shark continued its assault, each impact threatening to damage their remaining propulsion. Amy hurriedly distributed life jackets, though everyone prayed they wouldn't need them. The next strike came from below. The shark's massive body scraped along the keel, tilting the boat alarmingly. Water began seeping in through damaged seals, and the bilge pumps worked overtime. The passengers huddled in the center of the deck, tourists and students alike clinging to whatever was bolted down. Help arrived in the form of a Coast Guard helicopter and a nearby fishing vessel, the Pacific Lady. The shark, agitated by the helicopter's noise and the fishing boat's approach, made one final powerful attack on the Sea Star's damaged side before disappearing into the depths. The rescue operation was swift and professional. The fishing boat towed them back to harbor while the Coast Guard maintained watch from above. Though scared, the passengers were physically unharmed except for Mrs. Chen's minor head injury and some bruises from falling. The incident made headlines across California. Mark Wilson's photographs provided some of the clearest documentation ever captured of great white aggressive behavior toward a vessel. Marine biologists studying the case suggested the shark might have been defending a nearby feeding ground or been affected by unusual ocean temperatures that season. The damage to the Sea Star was extensive, but repairable. During repairs, they discovered teeth embedded in the propeller housing, valuable specimens that helped scientists confirm the shark's extraordinary size. The incident led to new discussions about whale watching practices and safety protocols in areas known for great white activity. Rebecca and her crew returned to work within weeks, their boat reinforced with additional hull plating. They added shark monitoring equipment and enhanced their safety protocols. Amy incorporated the experience into her marine biology presentations, using it to educate passengers about shark behavior and ocean conservation. The Chen family, despite their frightening experience, developed a deep interest in marine life. Katie, particularly affected by the encounter, began studying marine biology. The college students' footage and observations became part of a research paper on great white behavior, contributing to scientific understanding of these apex predators. Today, the Sea Star continues to operate in Monterey Bay, though passengers sometimes ask about the shark incident. Rebecca keeps Mark Wilson's most dramatic photograph mounted in the cabin, a reminder of the day they came face to face with one of the ocean's most powerful predators and lived to tell the tale. The great white was spotted several more times that season before disappearing into the vast Pacific. Its unusual behavior sparked new research into shark vessel interactions, leading to better understanding and safety measures for whale watching operations worldwide. For those aboard the Sea Star that day, the encounter served as a powerful reminder that the ocean's greatest predators command respect, even as we venture into their domain to witness the sea's gentler giants. The morning fog clung to the cliffs of Mendocino County on September 15, 1962, as the Sea Hunter headed out for another day of abalone diving. In those days, abalone was plentiful along California's coast, and the dangerous work of harvesting them paid well. For veteran diver Frank Russo, 45, this would be a day that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The crew was small. Frank, his longtime diving partner Mike O'Reilly, 38, and their tender Tommy Martinez, 19, who handled the boat and airlines. They'd worked together for 2 seasons, becoming one of the most successful teams on the coast. Their heavy canvas diving suits and copper helmets might have looked antiquated, but they got the job done. "Weather report's good today," Tommy called from the wheelhouse as they anchored near their usual spot. The water was calm, unusual for September, and visibility promised to be excellent. In 1962, they didn't have modern depth finders or shark spotting systems, just experience and gut instinct. Frank went down first, descending slowly on the steel ladder hanging off the boat's side. The water was cold, around 55 degrees, but his thick canvas suit kept him relatively comfortable. At 40 feet, he began methodically searching the rocky bottom for the precious mollusks. Radio communication was primitive then. Each diver had a line tender who monitored their air supply and responded to rope signals. One tug meant, "All okay." Two meant, "Give me slack." And three meant, "Pull me up fast." It wasn't perfect, but it had worked for decades. 2 hours into the dive, Frank had nearly filled his collection bag. Through his helmet's foggy window, he watched Mike working about 30 feet away. The visibility was so good, he could see Tommy's boat silhouetted against the surface above. The first warning came from the seals. The area usually had dozens of harbor seals lounging on nearby rocks, but suddenly, they vanished. Frank had been diving these waters long enough to know what that meant. He tugged his line 3 times hard. The great white appeared from behind a rocky outcropping, moving with the deliberate purpose that made them such effective predators. Even through his clouded faceplate, Frank could tell it was enormous, easily 20 feet long, one of the largest he'd ever seen. "Pull him up! Pull him up!" Tommy shouted topside, seeing the shark's massive shadow through the clear water. But the ancient hand-cranked winch worked slowly, too slowly. The shark circled once, ignoring Frank, then made straight for Mike. Mike saw it coming and tried to wedge himself between 2 rocks. In the cumbersome diving suit, movement was nearly impossible. The shark's initial pass knocked him sideways, air bubbles streaming from his helmet's seals. Frank watched helplessly as he was winched upward, floating like a copper and canvas puppet. The shark struck Mike's airline first, severing it with one bite. Then it attacked the diving suit itself, its massive jaws crushing the metal helmet. Tommy worked desperately to bring both divers up, alternating between winches while trying to radio for help on their primitive system. It was agonizing work. Each diver weighed over 200 pounds in their gear. The shark made another pass at Mike, but something extraordinary happened. Whether by instinct or training, Mike released his weight belt. The sudden buoyancy sent him shooting toward the surface like a cork. The shark, momentarily confused by the movement and stream of bubbles, turned its attention to Frank. Frank felt the massive predator brush against his legs as he neared the surface. The thick canvas offered little comfort. He'd seen these sharks bite through boat hulls, but somehow, incredibly, it didn't attack. Perhaps the unfamiliar shape and metal components of the diving suit gave it pause. Breaking the surface was like emerging from a nightmare. Tommy hauled Frank aboard first, then scrambled to help Mike, who was floating face up, his helmet partially crushed but somehow still intact. The shark circled the boat several times before finally disappearing into the depths. Mike had suffered several broken ribs from the initial impact, and his helmet was dented so badly they had to cut it off. But he was alive, one of the few people in history to survive a great white attack in deep water. The incident made headlines up and down the coast, marking the beginning of the end for traditional hard-hat abalone diving. Local fishermen organized a shark hunt despite Frank's protests. He understood better than most that the shark was simply being a shark. The hunt proved futile. The great white was never seen again, though its legendary size grew with each retelling of the story. The Sea Hunter returned to diving within a week, though they added shark cages for protection, among the first commercial divers to do so. The incident led to significant changes in the abalone industry, pushing it toward modernization and eventually safer diving practices. Tommy Martinez went on to become a commercial diving instructor, using his experience that day to teach new divers about shark awareness. Mike O'Reilly recovered from his injuries but never dove commercially again, instead opening a successful seafood restaurant in Fort Bragg. Frank Russo continued diving until retirement in 1985. His original diving helmet, with its foggy window that had framed his view of one of the ocean's greatest predators, now sits in the Maritime Museum of Mendocino. Next to it, A yellowing newspaper clipping tells the story of that September morning when two men in outdated diving suits faced down one of the largest great whites ever documented off the California coast. Today, abalone diving is strictly regulated, and the heavy canvas suits and copper helmets are museum pieces. But old-timers still talk about 1962, the year a monster shark reminded everyone that in the ocean's depths, mankind's dominance is an illusion, and survival sometimes depends on nothing more than luck and a well-timed release of a weight belt. The summer of 1955 at the Palm Beach Shores Club was the kind that old-timers would talk about for decades. The exclusive club, with its pristine private beach and elegant clubhouse, had always been a haven for Florida's wealthy elite. But on July 28th, the calm waters off their beach would become the scene of one of the most dramatic shark encounters in Atlantic coast history. Harold Whitmore, the club's 52-year-old swimming instructor, had been teaching water safety there for 12 years. That morning, he was giving his usual lessons to a group of teenage club members, including Patricia Crawford, 15, daughter of a prominent local judge, and the Mitchell twins, Thomas and James, both 16. The beach was relatively crowded for a Thursday morning. Margaret Ashworth, a local photographer, was there documenting club life for their annual newsletter. Several families lounged under striped umbrellas, and a dozen or so swimmers enjoyed the unusually clear water. "Perfect conditions today, kids," Harold told his students as they practiced their life-saving techniques in the designated swimming area. The water was calm, visibility excellent, and the morning sun made the surface sparkle like diamonds. Betty Reynolds, a 43-year-old club member, was the first to notice something odd. From her beach chair, she watched a school of mullet leap from the water, something she'd never seen so close to shore. "Look at that," she remarked to her husband, Richard. "Fish don't usually come in this close." Harold noticed it too. In 12 years of teaching, he'd learned to read the water's moods. Something had spooked those fish, and his instincts told him it wasn't good. He began whistling his students back toward the shore. The bull shark appeared without warning, its gray dorsal fin slicing through the water between the students and the beach. At about 11 feet long, it was large for its species, and its behavior was immediately aggressive. Bull sharks were known for their unpredictability, especially in shallow water. "Swim steady, don't splash," Harold shouted, remembering his Navy training. Patricia Crawford was closest to shore, followed by Thomas Mitchell. James had drifted slightly further out, practicing his backstroke. The shark made its first pass between the swimmers, causing Patricia to let out a terrified scream. Harold immediately began swimming toward James, who was furthest from safety. Margaret Ashworth, recognizing the gravity of the situation, began photographing the scene, images that would later become famous. The shark circled back, this time targeting James Mitchell. The boy tried to remain calm, but panic took over and he began thrashing in the water. The shark charged, its powerful body leaving a wake on the surface as it approached. Harold reached James just as the shark attacked. With incredible presence of mind, he grabbed the boy and thrust his own body between him and the predator. The shark's rough skin scraped against Harold's leg as it passed, drawing blood. By now, the beach was in chaos. Richard Reynolds had grabbed a boat hook from the nearby sailing shed and was wading into the shallow water, trying to create a barrier between the swimmers and the shark. Other club members were shouting and throwing anything they could find into the water to distract the predator. The shark made another pass, this time grazing Thomas Mitchell's arm as the boy neared the safety of the shallows. The water around him turned pink, but the wound was superficial. Patricia Crawford had already reached the beach, helped by several adults who'd formed a human chain into the water. Harold continued pushing James toward shore, but the blood from his own leg wound had attracted the shark's full attention. The predator circled tighter, each pass bringing it closer. Harold knew he couldn't outswim it. His only hope was to keep his eyes on it and maintain his position between the shark and the boy. The next attack came from below. The shark rushed upward, its jaws snapping shut inches from Harold's leg. The instructor kicked out instinctively, his foot connecting with the shark's sensitive snout. The impact bought them precious seconds. Richard Reynolds had now reached them with the boat hook, jabbing it toward the shark while other club members continued throwing chairs and umbrellas into the water, creating chaos that confused the predator. The strategy worked. The shark broke off its attack, disappearing into deeper water. The entire incident had lasted less than 5 minutes. Margaret Ashworth's photographs captured every terrifying moment, from the first fin sighting to the final desperate swim to shore. Her images would later appear in Life magazine, bringing national attention to the increasing number of shark encounters along Florida's coast. Harold suffered deep lacerations on his left leg, requiring 52 stitches. Thomas Mitchell's arm wound was minor, needing only 7 stitches. James Mitchell was physically unharmed but would never swim in the ocean again. The Palm Beach Shores Club immediately installed shark nets around their swimming area, among the first private clubs to do so. Harold's actions became a model for water safety protocols, and his technique for dealing with shark encounters was taught to lifeguards up and down the coast. Margaret Ashworth's photographs proved invaluable to marine biologists studying bull shark behavior in shallow waters. The incident led to better understanding of shark patterns along Florida's beaches and the development of more effective safety measures. Harold Whitmore continued teaching at the club until his retirement in 1972. His story became legend among club members, and his quick thinking saved not only James Mitchell's life, but likely others as well. The boat hook Richard Reynolds used that day still hangs in the club's lobby, mounted alongside Margaret's most famous photograph, the one showing Harold facing down the shark, protecting his student with complete disregard for his own safety. Today, the Palm Beach Shores Club still stands, though modern safety equipment has replaced the simple shark nets of 1955. But older members still tell the story of that July morning when a swimming instructor's courage and quick thinking prevented what could have been a devastating tragedy, reminding everyone that sometimes the biggest heroes are found in the most unexpected moments. The research vessel Coral Explorer drifted quietly in the warm waters off Australia's Osprey Reef, 350 kilometers northeast of Cairns. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's team had spent 6 weeks studying the impact of ocean acidification on the reef system. But on August 15, 2012, their routine research would be interrupted by an encounter that would challenge everything they thought they knew about apex predators. The team consisted of 6 researchers: Sarah, a 39-year-old marine biologist specializing in coral ecosystems; James Cooper, 45, an oceanographer from the University of Queensland; Lisa Wong, 31, their dive specialist and safety officer; twins Mark and Michael Chen, 28, documentary filmmakers capturing their research; and Tom Brady, 35, their experienced boat captain who'd spent 2 decades navigating these waters. That morning began like any other. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Sarah called her team for the daily briefing. "Water conditions are perfect," she announced, studying their instruments. "Visibility should be exceptional, at least 30 meters. They plan to document a newly discovered coral formation at a depth of 40 meters, deeper than their usual research sites." Lisa ran through the safety checks with practiced efficiency. "Remember, we're going deeper today. No unnecessary risks, and everyone stays with their buddy." The team would deploy in pairs, Sarah with James, Mark with Michael, while Lisa coordinated safety from the surface with Tom. The first sign something was amiss came during the initial descent. Schools of fish that typically populated the reef's upper layers were noticeably absent. Sarah made a note in her underwater tablet, unusual behavior that warranted investigation. At 30 meters, the reef's true magnificence revealed itself. Massive coral formations rose from the depths like underwater skyscrapers, their surfaces teeming with marine life. The Chen brothers positioned their cameras, capturing the stunning biodiversity for their documentary. "Something's not right," James's voice crackled through their underwater communication system. He pointed to a group of gray reef sharks, regular inhabitants of these waters, swimming erratically, their movements suggesting agitation rather than their usual calm patrolling behavior. Sarah was about to respond when a shadow passed overhead, so large it momentarily darkened the water around them. Through their clear comms, they heard Lisa's urgent voice from the surface. "Large shark approaching from the north. Unlike anything I've seen before." The great white emerged from the blue like a submarine, its massive form dwarfing the reef sharks which scattered in its presence. Later analysis of the Chen brothers' footage would estimate its length at over 20 feet, one of the largest ever documented. "Everybody stay calm and group together," Sarah commanded, her scientific mind racing to process what she was seeing. Great whites rarely ventured this far north into tropical waters, and never this large. The shark's behavior was unusual too, deliberate and focused rather than cautiously investigative. The predator began circling their group, each pass bringing it closer. Through their cameras, the Chen brothers captured incredible footage of its scarred hide and black, expressionless eyes, evidence of decades of survival in the ocean's depths. James noticed it first. The shark's unusual coloration and markings suggested extreme age, possibly making it one of the oldest great whites ever encountered. But there was no time for scientific observation. The shark's circles were tightening, its behavior growing more aggressive. "Start ascending, slowly," Lisa instructed from above. "Maintain your formation." But at 40 meters, they couldn't risk a rapid ascent without facing decompression sickness. They would need to make several safety stops, minutes that suddenly seemed like an eternity. The shark made its first aggressive move at 35 meters, charging through their group with shocking speed. Its massive body brushed against Michael's camera rig, sending him spinning through the water. Mark grabbed his brother's BCD, stabilizing him as the shark circled back. "Deploy the shark shield," Sarah ordered. Each diver carried an electronic device designed to deter sharks through electromagnetic pulses. They activated them simultaneously, creating a barrier of electrical current around their group. The shark recoiled from the initial shock but didn't retreat. Instead, it began testing their defenses, looking for weaknesses in their electronic barrier. Its intelligence was unnerving, each approach more calculated than the last. At their first safety stop, 25 meters deep, disaster struck. James's shark shield malfunctioned, creating a gap in their protective field. The great white charged immediately, as if it had been waiting for this opportunity. Its massive jaws closed on James's oxygen tank, the pressure causing the aluminum cylinder to creak ominously. Sarah reacted instinctively, pushing her own shark shield almost against the predator's gills. The close-range shock caused the shark to release James, but the attack had damaged his equipment. Air bubbled from stress fractures in his tank. Share air," Lisa commanded from above. Sarah immediately offered James her alternate air source, but now they were both limited by a single tank's air supply. The shark continued circling, undeterred by their defensive measures. Mark and Michael positioned themselves on either side of Sarah and James, their cameras still rolling, documenting what might be the most extensive footage ever captured of great white hunting behavior. The shark's next attack came from below, driving them upward too quickly. "Watch your ascent rate," Lisa warned as their computers beeped warnings. Going up too fast could be as deadly as the shark itself. They had to maintain controlled movement despite the immediate threat below them. The next few minutes became a desperate dance. The shark would charge, they would dodge while maintaining their depth, sharing air and watching their computers. Each safety stop felt like an eternity as the massive predator tested their defenses repeatedly. At 15 meters during their final safety stop, the shark's behavior suddenly changed. It ceased its orbital attacks and moved directly above them, blocking their path to the surface. This new strategy demonstrated an intelligence that both terrified and fascinated Sarah's scientific mind. Tom had maneuvered the Coral Explorer directly above them, deploying additional shark shields over the side. The shark responded to the new electrical barrier by charging the boat itself, its massive body slamming into the hull with enough force to knock equipment off the lab tables. 3 minutes. Lisa counted down their final safety stop. The shark continued circling between them and the surface, but the boat's additional shark shields were creating a corridor of safety. They would have one chance to swim for it. "Now, go, go, go!" At Lisa's command, they made their final ascent. The shark made one last charge but turned away from the concentrated electrical field. They broke the surface one by one, being pulled aboard as the massive predator circled below. The entire incident had lasted 27 minutes, though to those involved it felt like hours. Everyone had survived, but the experience had left its mark. James's damaged oxygen tank displayed teeth marks that would later be used to help estimate the shark's size. The Chen brothers' footage became some of the most important great white documentation ever recorded, capturing hunting behavior never before seen at such depths. Marine biologists studying the case suggested the shark's unusual size, age, and behavior might represent an unknown population of deepwater great whites. Its presence in tropical waters sparked new research into how climate change might be affecting shark migration patterns. Sarah and her team eventually returned to their research, though with enhanced safety protocols. Their experience led to improvements in shark shield technology and new guidelines for deepwater research diving. The damaged oxygen tank now sits in the Queensland Museum, alongside a continuous loop of the Chen brothers' remarkable footage. Tom Brady continued captaining the Coral Explorer, though he added more shark-deterrent equipment to his vessel. Lisa Wong used their experience to develop new safety protocols for research diving, incorporating lessons learned from their encounter. The great white was spotted several more times that season, becoming known among local researchers as the matriarch, due to its enormous size and apparent age. Its presence changed how scientists viewed these ancient predators, suggesting they grew larger and lived longer than previously thought. Today, the Osprey Reef still draws researchers and divers, though everyone who ventures into these waters knows the story of the Coral Explorer's encounter. The Chen brothers' documentary, when finally released, changed public perception of great whites, showcasing not just their power, but their intelligence and complexity as apex predators. For Sarah's team, the incident served as a humbling reminder that despite all our technology and knowledge, the ocean's greatest predators remain mysterious and worthy of respect. Their survival had depended not just on equipment and protocols, but on teamwork and keeping cool under unimaginable pressure, qualities that would serve them well as they continued their vital research in the world's oceans.